Welcome to the Wellness Hub Cafe. I'm Julie Wren, nutritional therapist and wellbeing coach, founder of Olea Absolute Nutrition and Wellness and the Wellness Hub. Today on International Women's Day, I wanted to explore the topic of transformation. Throughout our lives, there are always moments of transformation that have the potential to take us to new directions, to learn more about ourselves and others, and also to experience life differently. So I'm delighted to be able to bring together four amazing women who are dedicating themselves to supporting and guiding women along the path of their own personal transformational journeys to really reclaim the authentic expression of who they truly are. And together today, we will be discussing why women often start to search for that missing something in their life in their mid-40s and beyond, and really go looking and seeking out those transformational experiences. So on the virtual couch today, I have with me Amanda Hinman, who specializes in helping successful women over 40 struggling with hormone imbalances and exhaustion to really heal naturally and gain lots of extra energy so they can maximize their impact in career and family. She's also the founder of the Hinman Holistic Health Institute, and she's been helping hundreds of women reclaim their health from all sorts of terrors like Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, anxiety, PCOS, and so much more. And also we have today from the States as well, we have Cynthia Martin from California. She's a mindset coach and personal freedom activator who really empowers conscious professionals to break through hidden barriers to unlock their highest potential of success. We also have Gabriella Boccanetti, who's a holistic health coach, a nutritional therapist like myself. She's a yoga teacher and also a sound therapy specialist. And we have the lovely Sonia Cruz Oro originally from Spain, but she's living out in Ireland, and she's a certified travel coach. She works with women who are struggling to find perhaps the right travel companion or the right time to travel or even the money. And she's really helping them to reconnect with their authentic self through meaningful and transformative travel experiences. And I want to thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us, Julie.
Very much, Julie.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure, and what an honor to be celebrating International Women's Day with you guys.
Thank you so much. I think that the midlife years are one of those defining moments for many women as they kind of transition into a new phase of life. And certainly the women that I meet often have a lot of questions about perhaps their purpose in life. They're struggling to understand what's happening to their bodies and why they don't really feel like themselves anymore. And they're often experiencing a roller coaster of emotions and feel they're perhaps at war with their hormones. And this is often accompanied by a sense of dread or fear as to what's coming. And I think this has been especially true for women who are now in their 50s and 60s, because 30 years ago, when we were in our late teens and early 20s, there were not open conversations going on about what my mother used to refer to as the change. However, thankfully today we have the possibilities and places to come together. We can step forward. We're being invited to step forward and speak up about what we're experiencing and get our needs met. And of course, that's should we choose to do so. So really my first question to my panel today is, do you feel in your own practices that this is the case? That are women more comfortable and more vocal in expressing their needs? Or is there still a kind of reticence or a hesitation around the subject? And I'm asking that again, especially among women in business and senior management positions. So Amanda, what's your take on that?
Thank you, Julie. Yes, I will say that my experience is women are more open in general and starting to have these conversations of what is possible, especially when it relates to our overall hormone health. I think there tends to be a expectation that as we reach a certain age, we're just going to have pesky symptoms and things that we have to deal with that are just kind of the way it is. And yet people are questioning that. Does it always have to be that I'm going to have poor sleep or weight gain? It's starting to become questioned as opposed to accepted. I believe there's still kind of an expectation that that's what happens. Yet we're starting to say, like, is there a better way? And this is what, what I see in my practice all the time, of those women who are stepping forward and say, hey, I really do want to continue to contribute or continue to have an impact in my career or in my family's life. So I don't necessarily want to start to have more hours where I'm feeling fatigue, feeling exhausted, poor sleep. So they're seeking out additional support and resources. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. And Cynthia, what about for you?
For me as well, a lot of my work is rooted in the subconscious mind and all the things that we're not aware of, and even the questions that we don't even know we have. So what I'm finding more and more is that there is more questions around it. And as Amanda had mentioned, there's more pushback on the stigma and the societal expectations of previous generations. And as a matter of fact, I had just watched a powerful video by the female lead, and his research done even in the professional space, how those stigmas carry a heavy weight and they really impact us, and they're almost creating a hypersensitivity and hyper awareness that is creating even more difficulty to transition through those phases of our life, not just for women in their 40s, 50s and 60s, but even the younger generations who are wanting to start a family. So the difficulty that is really increasing is around the breaking those barriers and those old models of thinking and belief systems that are very prevalent, and being able to navigate that internal dialogue, that internal war, and those internal expectations, and then how to move away from them and own your own voice in that process of your own body and your own mind.
Yeah, super, very powerful. Thank you. And Sonia, from your perspective in terms of a travel, I mean, how have you noticed the women coming forward and seeking out your support?
Yeah, in my case, it's more about emotional and existential needs in this case. But yeah, I don't think it's so easy to vocalize, or sometimes even being aware that these needs are not being taken into consideration, that they are being neglecting these needs. And somehow, one of the main reasons can be that also because women, I suppose it's also the society expectations, or because we are givers, natural givers, we tend to put our other needs first, other needs of other people around us first. So sometimes we are not even aware that we are neglecting our own needs. And also can be that maybe we are aware, but we feel kind of guilty, or we feel ashamed of sharing that we feel this way because we judge our feelings. We believe that maybe we should not feel this way. So either way, sometimes it's difficult to vocalize or ask for help for that.
Thank you so much. And we'll go over to Gabriella now as well and see how that has also been affecting in her practice.
Yes, a great question. And the answer is yes and no, because in private conversations, this kind of high-flying women are more open, as I hold this safe space for them. And they have worked with me, they know and trust me. So they open up and they talk about their issues. When there is a group setting, though, or in a small community, they tend to be more reserved, or even sometimes refuse to talk about their problems, because that has been the conditioning that they've lived with, and that women in high level positions can't complain, you have to be always happy. There's all these ideas that we've been living with, and that don't allow us to speak freely, even in only in between women, only in women's circles, like sometimes I hold virtual spas as well. So it's mostly feminine events for them, and they still sometimes feel a bit disconnected from their core, from their heart. And sometimes you, as a therapist, you already see the person and you know what keeps them back, or what keeps them closed, so to speak.
Yes, so very, very true. So yeah, having those sacred spaces are truly really important. Okay, thank you very much, Gabriella, for that last comment there. So my next question is, looking at my female friends and myself included, I mean, many of us have made some pretty big career changes in our late 40s and early 50s, going back to study and retrain. In fact, some people have even sort of left their partners, in their personal lives, they've made big changes or just moved countries. I mean, do you think that women wake up one day and say to themselves, oh my gosh, this is not the life I expected, I want more, or I want different? Or do you consider it to be more of an organic change that kind of seeps in and creeps in over time?
I think it is an organic change that creeps in over time. And it's kind of this process of finding out and discovering who we are, which usually can start with disseminating and determining who we don't want to be. Sometimes we become more aware of what we don't prefer. That helps us shape and guide our new preferences for that next change, right? That season of change. So it's interesting because often, like you said, many women make a pretty significant change, whether it be career-wise or partner-wise or just, other relationship dynamics. And usually it's simply because there was an evolution of dissatisfaction that was leading to a point of clarity to help kind of move forward in a new path. And I think of it as it doesn't always, change can be challenging without a doubt, but it doesn't always have to be overwhelming or difficult. It can be exciting. It can be really rejuvenating and, inspiring as well.
True, very true. Thank you.
I agree with what Amanda is. You said it very beautifully, because it is an evolution. The journey to be able to discover who you really want to be or are, and in the process of unfolding that expression of yourself, is having the experience of what you don't, so that you can discover what you do. And it becomes an identity crisis, and it's a gradual progression, because the part of us as feminine, the feminine part of us is been suppressed in all cultures, and especially in the business world, and as entrepreneurs, we've quieted that part of ourselves and we've denied it for a really long time. So those are the parts that have been giving us clues all along, and then it becomes that buildup of dissatisfaction, is what you were saying, Amanda, and it becomes an identity crisis, because you reach a point that you really don't know which part of you to nurture. And in this whole movement, and in the time that we're in, where everybody's dishing out the, hey, you got to love yourself, self-care. Well, which part do you love? Right? Which part of you do you love? The one that's juggling 10 different things and raising kids and changing diapers and doing laundry while running a business, or trying to grow in your profession. It becomes very challenging, and it is an evolution. But what I find is key, and where we're headed now, is really embracing and reclaiming that feminine nurturing for ourselves. And it's almost like remothering ourselves and reparenting ourselves, so that we can come back to that place where we give ourselves permission to pursue our passions and express them without the limitations of the agenda of society, right? That says age puts you here in this box, and social stature, whatever that is, social stature, you can do whatever it is you want, as long as you have the courage to dive into it.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with my colleagues here. So I don't think this happens overnight, but sometimes can feel that it happens overnight, because usually there is like a trigger that can be like existential crisis. There is like a wake-up call, that make us think, and usually tend to be something that a sense of loss in our lives, that maybe it's a career change or change of direction, can be a relationship breakup, or somebody dead, or sometimes it's just what used to keep us busy is not there anymore. Maybe we were raising our kids and now they are grown-ups, or we were in a career that we were being fired, or we were studying and now suddenly we finished the studies. So it's like, what's next? Now what? So it's in these moments, I believe, that when we actually, maybe it was already there, these drops of water, but we were not paying attention. We were busy with our routines and our lives. And one day, suddenly there is the glass full, right? And it's when we stop and we look at it and we have to face it, and we have to change something.
Yep, exactly. I mean, for my own personal story there, I can share that, I just suddenly started to feel that I needed to be doing something different around, I think about 2011. And it took me till 2014 to really actually take the first step and make that change. And I think I can also relate that back to when I was also in my own, I didn't realize it at the time, in my own perimenopause journey. And it was quite traumatic as well. And I didn't know what was going on, but it took me those many years to really get that. So yes, I really think it is sometimes very much a slow organic thing. So yes, so Gabriella, would you like to add something more there?
It's true. So first of all, women, mature women, don't put up with shit, right? So it is that kind of dropping of the guard of the roles they've had to put up with for so long that this suddenly doesn't make any sense, and they refuse to put up with things that are not in line with their own values. And on the other hand, with the pandemic and everything that has been happening in the world in the last year, people reevaluate. So especially women who are not afraid to start again, they are not afraid to work hard and again start something from scratch, because life's too short and you should really be doing what you're passionate about and what you also in this age, menopause, around menopause, you sometimes discover your true calling. Or maybe in other cases, and I've seen colleagues with very good positions and suddenly they feel this doesn't fill them, it doesn't fulfill that that kind of satisfaction, which is not just monetary or in status, but really truly meaningful contribution to society that we want to bring.
Fantastic. So I know that you made a transition as well. I mean, was that early in your life, or did you come into wellness also at a crucial moment?
I'm still transitioning, because as I moved with my very stressful profession from the past, which is not always stressful, but it depends on how you take it and how I started training, and I started going into health and wellness and more deeply into restorative yoga and all the holistic elements of this kind of offering, where you know and can offer solutions for all the sides of a human being, especially for a woman who needs her her spiritual needs met, and also her wellness, her community, her nutritional knowledge. So it's all a holistic approach that we have to really take if we want to be resilient long term. So for me, then I moved towards this holistic health coaching and resilience coaching. I started talking about resilience before everybody else started.
Right. My third question actually is about how we view the perimenopause and menopause years. I mean, we could see it as the sort of the dawning of a new phase of life. I mean, if we're able to embrace it with positive focus, I mean, it doesn't have to be perceived negatively through the lens of aging or loss of fertility or desirability and attractiveness. So why do you think that women struggle, or some women struggle, to overcome the negativity that surrounds this transition period?
I think personally there has been a lack of communication and clarity of what is this new phase, what is the purpose of this new season in life. I hearken it back to nature, honestly, looking at plants, right? So it's very easy for us to notice plants when they're in blooming phase and to see the beautiful flowers, and that's when you can smell, the aroma in the air, and that's what people tend to appreciate most. However, it actually is in nature so critical when the plants are no longer blooming during, let's say, the winter months. and the roots are deepening, into the surface, broadening, the leaves become broader, richer, fuller. And that actually is the survival mechanism or the transition that is fruitful for the whole species. Oftentimes, what is happening in those non-blooming periods is more of a collective impact rather than the impact of that one plant having the beautiful flower to look at. So I think of it as, for us as women, we have this beautiful gift of an opportunity to say, hey, similar to nature, we have this phase where we're no longer necessarily prioritizing all of our time and attention on, reproduction, having babies, feeding babies, raising small children. That takes a ton of energy and a ton of our resources. When our resources no longer are required to be allocated in that direction, that means we have these other funnels, these other avenues open and available for us to deepen our roots, for us to broaden our leaves and create strength, create wisdom that can be shared more for the collective society as opposed to our individual offspring, right? I know it sounds weird to kind of translate it to like such, I don't know, biological terms as nature, but I really think that message is not heard often, right? It's not as visible. It's not as tangible as like seeing little kids running around and everyone knowing when you're, kind of like in that phase of life. So it's less poignant, it's less noticeably tangible, but it's no less important. In fact, I would argue the opposite, that when we embrace it and when we take the chance to really go within and become more self-aware, to do the inner work that Cynthia is talking about, really get to become curious and discover who we are, we can bring our greatest gifts and talents to the surface, which are supporting the collective.
Love the reference to nature, because as women, our connection to that biological experience is tied to nature. The natural cycles of time are 28 days, and that's when a woman has her cycle and goes through that process. And we forget that we're so closely in harmony and in tune, even if intellectually we're not connecting ourselves to it, or we're not being present to it. So just as the planet has changes and seasons, we do as well, and so does our life. And you're talking about those transitions from the different periods. The one thing that has been prevalently, persistent in all the conversations that I have and in the people that I work with, especially with women, is that they don't give themselves, and this was my experience as well, that I followed the dynamic of the very masculine way of living and needing to move the mountain and really propelling my life forward, that I didn't have anybody in my life to tell me that it was really important to slow down and be in the in-between, because the in-between, when we're doing the self-nurturing, where we're allowing ourselves to listen to what our body is already, the wisdom that our body already has to guide us in decision making, because a woman's cycle actually has a story to tell. So women have access to creative potentials that men don't at different parts of their cycle, which is really important, because you can even look at navigating all aspects of life according to those cycles and really elevate them and leverage them. But there's been that perpetuated stigma that it's a shameful thing to have this experience as a woman. And it goes way farther in than the current culture. Even in the indigenous tribes all around the world, women were removed from the tribes and to go have their experience elsewhere and not be seen. So it's a much deeper wound as a collective in the psyche of all humanity, that again, we have to change the dialogue, we have to change the story within ourselves, and we have to make a choice to say yes to that impulse that says, I don't accept this anymore, and I give myself permission to be in the discomfort, that I'm not going to go along with those old rules that says I accept decline in my life. I don't accept decline. And another thing too, this is something that I brought up to my clients recently, is that we create this idea, we make this agreement that says, oh, I can increase my tolerance for pain. let's go ahead and change that and say, how about we increase our tolerance for joy and have zero
That's
tolerance
very
for
true.
pain?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's a
Yeah.
big thing in the psyche of women that we go ahead and compound pressures on ourselves, on these expectations that we think that we need to meet, that we limit our ability to really be with our feminine grace and provide the best of that to ourselves so that we can provide the gift that it has to offer to those around us that we're nurturing as well. So, thank you for that question. It's really important.
Change is not easy, right? So change is difficult. And that's why many people stay in pain, even if they know they have to change, they are not able to change. So all changes are difficult. But well, I suppose this is also because the uncertainty and the unknown, what's in the other side. We don't know what are the benefits. The benefits are uncertain. So sometimes the mind make us focus on what we have to lose versus what we have to gain because of these survival reasons as well. But the only constant is change is a constant. So it's for sure we are going to change. So we have to embrace this change as a part of evolution. And I believe the best way to do that is focusing on what we know, because the known and the certainty is also a human need. So focus on what we know, what is up to us, what we can control. And this helps also as a travel perspective. So when people are afraid or, they have to go out the comfort zone and they have to change routines and they have to face challenges. And it's that. So I ask them what you can control, what's up to you. So this helps in this case to embrace this change and go through the unknown. And also what helps me a lot is to remember that all change does not happen to you. Change always happens for you. So this helps me a lot. Remember this, I think is very powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. This is not happening to me, this is happening for me. Yeah, very true.
I think it's been, I don't want to say the patriarchy, but we know it has been for many centuries a world run by men, and women have received all sorts of nasty labels. And when these hormonal changes occurred in a woman, she was often dismissed as mad and all that in the past, right? So there are still vestiges of that in society, but also, fortunately, these educational, what you said, there are now the new opportunities, all the alternative therapies that women respond well to, and also, thank God, I mean, fortunately, on television and in the mainstream media now, we have some programs that have that element of education about how menopause can be a positive thing. It's just a slow process. And this is where our role comes in as coaches, as people who understand and have the scientific knowledge behind us to support their changes. Because sometimes it feels very daunting, but small steps.
Absolutely. And I still think there's quite a lot of work to be done also in the workplace around understanding and appreciating those different phases of life. I also like the point that we discussed earlier about the idea of cycles, because in the menopause we think that we don't have a cycle anymore, but I do feel personally that there are cycles all the time happening, and maybe we're not having a cycle as we would know it, but I do feel that as you move into that menopause phase, when there is no longer a physical cycle that you can actually put your finger on, if you like, but there is still a cycle that is happening to you. So this is a question for Amanda. So from a hormonal perspective, I know it's really hard to feel comfortable in our own skin sometimes and be in command of our life when what I call you've got your hormone storm raging, or you're riding the emotional roller coaster, and that sort of perhaps is more prevalent perhaps in those perimenopause years. But I still feel as well that there are still those emotional ups and downs that we get after in those post-menopause years. So Amanda, perhaps could you explain to us what's really happening there with our hormones that could be making us feel like this? Or even if you can give us some tips and tricks of how to keep our hormones in balance, that would be fantastic.
Yes, absolutely, Julie. And especially as you mentioned, I do wholeheartedly believe that it's part of our genome as women that we are cyclical beings. So even after our menstruation has stopped, still aligning kind of our intention, our clarity, and our appreciation of the experience in a cyclical nature. I often tell women to track the moon cycle and use that as a gauge to allow yourself the acceptance of, you know, having periods of time where you feel a little bit lower energetically, and maybe it is time to rest and, you know, recover more. And then other weeks or days in the month where you're going to feel all on fire and ready to go, and maybe have more creativity. So these natural cycles, as Cynthia alluded to, there are definitely times of within each 28-day cycle that we naturally rotate through. And rather than trying to push against it, I think the most challenge comes when we are unaware of that pattern and we try and resist it or expect that it should be different rather than embracing it. And actually using it, I feel like it can become a really powerful tool once you understand it, right? To really leverage the different seasons and the different cycles in a way that's going to be to your advantage. Just like we mentioned, kind of having those moments of quiet, those moments of activity on purpose.
And would you say as well, Amanda, that in terms from a nutritional perspective as well, there are also times that we could leverage when we should be eating differently or perhaps even exercising differently within those cycle periods?
Absolutely. I often talk to my clients about noticing your own body's rhythms, and certain periods of time, it may be more advantageous to have a lower intensity exercise, to do more stretching, more yoga, more mindfulness. And then other times it may be invigorating to maybe do more of your cardiovascular type of activity or more rigorous movement, right? So that's a huge part. Another thing is thinking about the body, at least hormonally, tends to have a kind of preparing for release, right? If we think about preparing for release, and we think about the time that would be for menstruation. So even boosting foods that contain magnesium, for example, magnesium can help us to eliminate even bowel movements. I know I'm kind of weird talking about poop, but the reality is for some women, we tend to have almost more tension that we carry, because again, it's that resistance. We're resisting what's happening biologically with our body. So some women can tend to go the other way and become constipated. So I always think of adding in extra legumes that have fiber or extra foods that are high in magnesium to support what's happening with your body wanting to naturally release.
Yeah, I like that very much. I mean, I'm a great fan of also recommending magnesium for people who are highly stressed, because I mean, I think stress is one of those, that stress response really robs the body of its magnesium stores. Yeah, nature's tranquilizer, that's what we need.
Yes.
Thank you for that. All right, so my next question actually is for Sonia. So a friend of mine recently told me she was ready for a big travel adventure. I know her kids were all grown up and they were off having their own adventures, and she was actually divorced, and she realized that she'd never been really anywhere on her own. And she wanted to do something daring and travel with strangers and get out of our usual comfortable way of traveling. So Sonia, what would your advice be to somebody like her in that situation? What could this type of travel experience bring them in terms of a transformation?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I said earlier that certainty is one of the human needs, but variety and adventure is also a human need. So the first thing is, you have this call for adventure, you have to answer. Yeah, you have to fulfill these needs. That's the first thing. But yeah, to ensure you have the most of this experience, that your friend has the most of the travel experience, I would recommend both prepare internally and externally. Because I'm going to explain what I mean, because we sometimes forget that the experience is in the intersection of the internal and external. So most of the people only prepare the external, which is very important, right? So where we are going to go, when, how we are going to arrive there, the accommodations, the flights, all this stuff, the clothes we are going to pack, all this is important. But we have to do also an inner work if we want to have some transformation, as you mentioned, or find for some answers, or just as a way of personal growth, or to make the most of this trip. So it's important also to do like inner work and mindset work, right? So this is what I recommend always. And this could be done in 3 different stages. actually before the trip. It's important to do preparation before the trip in the sense of the intention in this case, right? So you say your friend is looking for adventure. Okay, what's really this means for her, how she wants to feel in this trip, what's her why, right? And this, we need to be truly honest with ourselves, because sometimes is we want to move towards something, to have fun or to have, this variety, but sometimes also we want to move away from something. So maybe we don't want to face or some challenges or some reality that's in our life, and it's not always easy to realize this. So sometimes you need to do inner work to find out. Then during the trip, also it's important to do some reflections and inner work there. So in this case, I would say, if she said that wants to do some things on her own, or find some people, travel with strangers for first time or something like that. So what kind of challenges she can see arising in this trip? So from her past experiences, what she thinks could happen for her during the trip, that maybe she needs to journal on it, or maybe some affirmations will help in this situation to make sure, it's not ruining the trip, and is actually help her to grow and move forward. And last but not least, upon return of the trip, is also important to do some reflection on the trip. Especially if we want lasting results, because sometimes we can arrive from the trip with we are very high and very excited, but sooner than later we are back to our routines and our own patterns. We are not aware, we go back to the old patterns, and if we really want a transformation, results that are there for the long term, we have to look at what actually we can implement, what in our reality maybe don't like, or we realize we want to do different. And can be small changes sometimes, or sometimes it's just we had breakthroughs and it's like a big change. Sometimes it's like a career change, or it's just we sell the house and we move countries. So it can be anything in between. But of course, I'm just saying here like a summary, but it's a deep work that you can do to make the most of this trip in this case.
Great. And this is the kind of work that you do with your clients. So you take them on that full journey, if you like, that inner work journey, and then help them to find the right trip. Is that as right?
Yeah, so we help not only with the itinerary and the logistics, also with the to do, some people are looking for this, can be a spiritual journey, can be like a mindset, can be just achieving some goals, or sometimes finding answers, clarity, or increasing the connection with yourself or with others or with the family. Depends what's your goal.
I used to travel a lot, and I would have this experience. I called it the post-traveler's depression, because I would have this experience of freedom, and then I'd come back to my everyday life and I would go fall into a real deep sadness, and how important the mindset and being able, and what you said is bringing that that follow through all the way into the last part of that last stage of your traveling experience, so that you can integrate. So I just wanted to know, because it's super valuable.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that.
So Cynthia, I'd like to come back actually to something that you mentioned earlier. A lot of women, you said, are having identity crises, and this could be around their, I think you said, their home, their social, their work life. So I know you've been working on this. Could you explain a little bit more about how this crisis comes about again, so we can be clear on that?
And it comes down to what all of us have touched on, is the expectations that we adopt and agree to, social norms and all that. And they're very deep rooted in our upbringing and our life experiences and our idea of what we think we need to be in those roles. And they're like dueling identities, right? For example, every woman in this panel has a powerful voice and doing wonderful things in their life, but we have other responsibilities and other things that our clients don't see. So I have 2 little girls, and I'm a wife, and I'm a daughter, and it all kinds of things, right? Caretaker, and I support a lot of people, and being able to transition between all of those becomes very difficult, because we separate them often. We don't always do a very good job, and we're not taught how to bridge those gaps between the different aspects of our life. And more importantly is that we forget that first and foremost, we are women, or we're individuals that have our own needs. And I think Sonia and Amanda mentioned it, that they kind of get lost by the wayside, right? Because we're trying to meet these expectations. So one of the questions that I often ask when I do talks in women's groups is, how many of us wake up with the first thing in their mind with a long to-do list? And everyone never fails. What raises their hands is like a pride about it, right? Yes, me, all these big to-do lists and lists for this and lists for that, all the things that we have to get done. And then the next question I ask is that, where are you on that list? And it goes silent every time, because more often than not, we're not on that list and our needs are not met. And we have to change the paradigm, because in order for us to listen to those calls that I was talking to earlier in our evolution, because we are different people at different stages of our life. We're not the same person we were yesterday. We're not even the same person before we started this call. We have now been in an experience where we have grown our wisdom and our knowledge and taken something new from this day. So how do we bring all of that with us and not feel like we're losing a part of us in some way or another? So that's the common thing, is that we have a tendency in the conversations, and even in the work that I do with the clients that I have the privilege to work with, is that they all come to this place, because a lot of it's spiritually focused, and they come to this place where they feel like they have to give something up in order to have this new way of life. And in fact, what I teach them is that they get to keep it all. They just get to redefine it and blend it versus separate it, right? And in order for that to happen, we have to give ourselves permission to grieve the in-between stages when we make those transitions. Because one thing that we do not do well as a culture and as a, global consciousness is teach people how to grieve and to let them know what that means, that grief is important in every aspect of life, because change, as Sonia beautifully said before, is not something that we're all equipped to deal with very well. And when there's change, it's uncertain, and uncertainty is scary. So we need to be able to grieve that part, no matter how small it is, to grieve that loss with grace, right? To grieve it with grace and self-compassion, because we beat ourselves up for not being or doing. And this is a common thing that I see on the personal growth journey. And this is the problem that I have with the whole idea of personal growth, is that we're constantly chasing this better version rather than accepting that we are the better version now, and we're just refining. And like Michelangelo, he's chiseling away the marble around the beautiful masterpiece. Right? So, the grief is what challenges us with those identity crises, and just accepting that who you are, but just to give yourself permission to feel what it feels like to be you and what you want. So those would be the questions that I would ask. What is it that you want? What is it that sparks that fire in you? And do a little bit more of that. Make sacred space for it, and even make an appointment with yourself to get to know you. Because it's been your life is usually, our lives are preoccupied with meeting the demands of everyone else, that we now need to bring ourselves to the top of that to-do list.
This kind of also brings me to a really specific question just for you, Gabriella, because a lot of women, obviously, they have a problem. I suppose one of the biggest problems I see in clinical practice is the problem with sleep, brain fog. Those are the two things. And again, that can really have an impact on your performance when you're at work. So the modalities that you practice is this yoga nidra, because I've been reading a lot about it. It's been popping up in that work context, and I'm really curious about it. And the same way with the sound therapy. I mean, how do those modalities really help women cope with those kind of problems?
So yoga nidra is an ancient tantric practice. So the most traditional hatha yoga comes from tantric tradition, and it's not about it's not all about sex. It's so much more. And we don't have time to go into that philosophy, but so it is a practice that it's a meditation that you do lying down. So you don't do anything. So your facilitator does all the work for you. So first of all, you don't have to worry about emptying the mind and all that monkey mind stuff that goes around, and everybody says, oh, I can't stop my thoughts. You don't have to. You just have to be there and listen. And at some point, if even you don't listen carefully to those instructions, you still benefit, because once you relax and the guiding instructions, first of all, relax you very deeply. The rest of it is going straight to your subconscious mind. And that's what I tell my clients. Don't worry, because most of my clients are linguists, and they are used to listening for the words and listening for language patterns and all that. And I always tell them, I'm speaking directly to your body. You don't need to focus, because precisely that's the power of the practice of Yoga Nidra, that you don't have to apply any effort. You just have to be there and receive the guidance. So a practice of 20 minutes or 30 minutes of Yoga Nidra, if it is administered by somebody who is trained and knowledgeable, will provide the equivalent of a 3 or 4 hours sleep. So it's very valuable, and even better, because you get to rest your nervous system and your brain, because there is a protocol that we follow. And even better than sleeping, because sometimes you think, oh, I'm sleeping, I don't have a sleep issue, but you're not really resting. So Yoga Nidra is a practice of deep rest.
Oh, that's amazing, because I do think that with all of us working as well from home a lot more, I'm definitely hearing from people that they're on sort of this constant, like Zoom after Zoom after meeting after meeting. There is no real time for rest, and perhaps people sometimes think about sleeping as being resting, but actually, you know, resting is something so totally different. Would you agree?
Exactly, yes, definitely, because if you have a stressful life, and let's face it, these days technology is also stressful. The fact that we have to learn to use all these apps, you're never really resting to the base level of rest and digest, where only these practices down regulate really truly your system. And then again, it has to be a practice. It doesn't come with the first time you do them.
Well, I just want to thank you all so much for sharing all of your wonderful wisdom here today. It's been so empowering to hear from you all. But before we close, could I just ask you to think about a word that you'd like to offer to, perhaps as a gift today, to our viewers, something that they could reflect on, something that we've talked about today. They could perhaps go away and they could start exploring. So what would be your word of the day today for International Women's Day, Amanda?
As soon as you came up with that question, Julia, the word discovery popped into my mind.
Super, thank you. Cynthia?
For me, it's grace. It's to really extend ourselves that much needed and well-deserved grace, because life is hard for everyone right now, and pretty much guarantee that everyone already came into this experience with things already in their backpack. So grace. And
Sonia?
I will say courage. Courage to follow your heart.
Beautiful.
Holistic. I think holistic should be the word, because it's not enough to have a vaccine or take a pill to just suppress a symptom, or to go to yoga once a month, or so they have to practice holistic health, and that takes into account all the aspects of the human being.
That's beautiful. I think that's a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much indeed, Gabriella. It's been wonderful to hear from you today.
Thank you.
Well, of course, my word's going to have to be transform, because that was the topic of today. You know, to take the opportunity to use the moments that we have to look at how we could perhaps change our lives, or not change as much as we said. You know, to transform, to allow things to come through for us. And I think, you know, we're so fortunate that we have, again, as I say now, so many people out there in the world there to help us and guide us along our journeys. Then we're in such a different place than where we were all those years ago. So I encourage every woman out there who is listening, you know, if you need something, just reach out into the community of these amazing women, and I'm sure that you can find somebody to be your guide on that path. So thank you so much. I wish you a great day.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, ladies.
Let's hope we can speak again one day soon. Thank you for watching.
For sure.